with all of the wonderful energy and the meditation, the music, and the prayers, I sometimes feel like I don't want to say anything at this point, but we're all here, and my host would not be happy if I didn't say something. No, I do love to share with you, and I do want to say thank you, Reverend Kristen and Brian, for the invitation to be here. Ellen, thank you for all that you do and have done. Thank you for all that have been part of this week at the conference and at the spiritual direction training. The energy here is just phenomenal. So I think just coming and sitting in the sanctuary is an experience in itself. So, and I often say, and I'll say it again, that I travel a lot. I speak at a lot of Unity churches. I've actually spoken at, I counted one time, I think it was almost 150 Unity churches over the years. This is pretty close to the top of the list in my experience. You really have a gem here. Yeah, you have. Yeah. What's that? Yeah, namaste, and thank you for that. So I'd like to begin with a story. I like stories. It's, I guess, the child in all of us loves stories. This particular story is from India. It's an ancient story from the Hindu tradition. In this particular story, there was a mother tiger and her cub. The cub was just a few weeks old. And tragically, the mother tiger was killed by hunters for her beautiful skin. And so the cub was left bereft, wandering through the jungle, the forest, not old enough to hunt, and not knowing how to survive. So after wandering for several days, the cub came upon a herd of sheep and saw that the sheep were grazing. They seemed to be happy. They seemed to be safe. So she thought, well, maybe I'll just join them. So maybe I'll sneak into the flock here and be taken care of. And sure enough, she was. And she was raised as the other baby sheep were raised. And she was taught all of the qualities of sheephood, growing up with that particular conditioning. And so she was relatively happy and safe, and things were going okay. Until one day, she was grazing, and she heard a movement in the forest behind her. And so she turned around very quickly and looked. And there was the most beautiful, powerful, magnificent creature she had ever seen in her life. And this creature scared her so much that she ran away. But yet she was so intrigued. So the next day she went right back to the same spot, thinking maybe I'll see it again. And sure enough, she saw this beautiful, white, luminescent, glowing being. And it looked at her and it went, "Arr!" And she went, "Bah!" Turned around, ran away. Scared. But something within her said, you got to go back. So she's like so many of us, drawn by the light, repelled by the heat, that approach avoidance, come here, go away. So she couldn't leave, and yet she couldn't totally approach this being. It was just too magnificent. So finally, she got the courage to follow this beautiful being into the forest, And it took her on a long journey through a path in the forest until she came to this very still, very clear, beautiful pool of water. And the tiger, angel, teacher, guide said to her, drink. And so the sheep tiger bent over to take a drink of water. And as she did, she saw her reflection in the water. And it startled her. She said, this is not what I thought I looked like. I thought I looked like everyone else around me. So she looked again, and then she looked up and she saw that I looked more like him. And so over the next several days, weeks, months, the mentor tiger trained this little tiger over and over again to come back to the water hole, to come back and look at the water, the reflection, and see who she really was. And so eventually the tiger went back and bid farewell to her old friends in the flock. She totally shed her sheepskin and was free. And lived happily ever after, of course. So I've got another story that's similar to that, but it's different. So I'd like you to just listen to the similarities and the differences. This story takes place in ancient times as well, but it's in the Middle East. And there is a man named Jesus of Nazareth who's a teacher of wisdom, and has a reputation across the land, although they don't know quite who he is. So when he and some of his disciples came to a place called Caesarea Philippi, which was near the coast of the Mediterranean, he said, I want to ask you guys a question. Who are people saying that I am? Who do men say that I am? Who do women say that I am? Well, they said, some say you're John the Baptist come back. Some say you're Elijah. Some say you're a prophet. So they knew he was a very, very wise being, but they didn't quite know exactly who he was. So then Jesus looked at his disciples. He looked them right in the eye, and he said, who do you say that I am? And 11 of them looked back at him with a glassy-eyed stare. One of them stood up and said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And as the story continues, it's been said that he said, blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah. You haven't seen with physical eyes, you've seen with the eyes of faith. And upon this rock, I will build my church. And the name Peter is very close to the Greek word for rock, which is Petra, rock or stone. Upon this rock. But I was told, as a Catholic growing up, that meant that Peter was the first pope. Right? Some of you have heard that, right? Yeah. And then all the popes after that, they somehow have a special vision, et cetera, et cetera. Jesus was special, the popes are special. But I believe that when Jesus talked about upon this church I will build, or upon this rock I will build my church, he was talking about the perception of faith, which is what Peter represents And it's what Peter had when he was able to see who Jesus was. And that's what faith is. It's the ability to see who and what we really are. It's the ability to see what others, seemingly others, really are. I say seemingly because we discover they're part of us. We're all fingers on God's hand. Okay? So I'd like to look at these two stories. I love to compare them because they're alike but a little bit different. The sheep, tiger, was told who she was, and she believed it. She didn't know who she really was till she met the tiger. The tiger is kind of like a teacher or a teaching or something in our life that wakes us up. Myrtle Fillmore, one of the co-founders of the Unity Movement, was dying of tuberculosis. She was 40 years old, perhaps. And it's about 1890, approximately. And she was told there's not much you can do. So she and her husband, Charles Fillmore, were attending a metaphysical lecture. And the teacher at that time, a man named E.B. Weeks, said, among other things, he said to everyone, "You are a child of God. You do not inherit illness. You are a child of God. You do not inherit illness." Now, I imagine everybody in the room heard it, but Myrtle heard it in a very, very deep way. And those words ignited a fire within her. And those words were like a spark that ignited that fire of faith. And so she began to see through the eyes of faith who she really was. And she began to meditate and pray. And in that experience, she was able to transform her body from a sick, dying body into a healthy body, vibrant, that lived another 40 years. Amen to that, right? If it wasn't for E.B. Weeks, if it wasn't for that spark, if it wasn't for that awakening, we wouldn't be here. This beautiful ministry would not be here. That spark, that tiny little spark in that moment of time, ignited a fire that has spread across this country many times over. And you and I are part of that. And I am so grateful. So, looking at who we are, how do I know who I really am? How do I go beyond the words? Well, we begin with the question, who do men say that I am? Who do women say that I am? Who have you been told that you are? Who have you been taught that you are, you say? You were probably taught that you were a sheep, right? Maybe different color sheep, different size sheeps, different gender sheeps, and different birth orders, different levels of intelligence, good boy, bad boy, whatever the case may be. Good girl, good girls do this, they don't do this, good boys act this way. On and on and on and on, you know. I don't have to tell you. Conditioning. We are told over and over again who we are, who we're supposed to be, and who we're not supposed to be. And 99% of humanity accepts this and lives and dies believing that this is all that I am. And some of us are fortunate enough to have a tiger in our life. Okay, now who was the tiger in your life? The tiger may have been a teaching, not necessarily one person. But there was something that awakened that spark within you. And like the little tiger sheep, you kept coming back. I don't know why I'm coming back, but I'm coming back. You want me to be a unity minister? Oh my God, that scares the hell out of me. You know, I'm going to run. I went bah and ran. You see. But that tiger kept coming over and over again. You see. And so our true nature is going to wake us up in spite of ourselves when we're ready. When we're ready. Who do men say that you are? Who have you been taught to be? What was your somebody training? Were you a good boy or bad boy? Were you intelligent? Were you the scapegoat, the hero, et cetera, et cetera? You know, we all have these different roles we learn. The way to discover the tiger is to shed the sheepskin. The only way to shed the sheepskin is to see it, to be aware of it, to know that it's there. See, most of us don't even know that it's there. It's so familiar and so comfortable. And we just accept that this is who I am. But as we begin to feel how tight it is and begin to look at what it really is through the eyes of truth, that sheepskin begins to melt, to dissolve, because we see that it's not really real when we subject it to the faith, when we see it for what it really is. But we have to do that because it feels so very real. So much of my life I feel like a sheep. I don't feel like a tiger, you see. Maybe that's because it's comfortable, familiar. All my buddies are sheep. If I become a tiger, I'm going to have to leave my family, my friends. There's a price we pay, seemingly, for claiming who we are and letting go of our sheepskin. Now, I want to emphasize that letting go doesn't mean always leaving or destroying. It means simply not being identified with it anymore. Okay? So what we're letting go of is our identification as a human being. We're still human. You know, we still are mothers and fathers and grandparents and so on and so forth. We play the roles, ministers, doctors, carpenters, whatever. We can play the role, but that's not who we are. That's the skin we put on temporarily. But the problem is, so much of the time that skin sticks to us. We can't take it off. And we're prisoners of who we thought we were. So as we claim our tigerhood, we will discover these places where the sheepskin is sticking to us. Truth can be very challenging. You've heard this quote, many of you, from Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us the most. Because the darkness, the sheepskin, it's familiar, it's comfortable, it doesn't challenge us. We know how to function in it. The tiger is brand new. It's exciting and powerful, but it's very demanding. It's demanding that we constantly come back to the knowledge of who we really are. Jesus knew who he was. You and I are awakening to that. Sometimes we roar, and sometimes we go, bah, I don't want to do that. Okay? We are seeds. We are God's seeds, if you will. And faith is the ability to look at the seed and to see the tree in the seed. If you hold up an apple seed and look at it, can you see an apple tree, an orchard, a whole world full of trees in that seed? And that's what the Christ nature is. It's not a thing. It's not an object. You got it or you don't have it. It's an organic unfolding energy that goes beyond any description that we can have. But we can perceive it. We cannot understand it in human language. We cannot put it into concepts in human language. But we can experience it and we can know it. And the only way to do that is through the eyes of faith. And we develop faith as we pray, as we meditate, as we're honest with ourselves, and as we continue to walk the path of the tiger. And little by little, the sheep herd is further and further away. Sometimes we still hear the bah, 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 and there's, maybe I should go back. But eventually we say, no, I want to be free. Thomas Merton was a Catholic monk and a mystic. And so I'd like to close with this quote. He had an experience of seeing through the eyes of faith, seeing things as they really are, seeing through the eye of the tiger. He says, then it was as if I suddenly saw the secret beauty in their hearts. I suddenly saw the secret beauty in their hearts, the depth of their hearts where neither sin nor desire nor self-knowledge can reach, the very core of their reality, the person that each one is in God's eyes. If only they could see themselves as they really are. If only we could see each other that way all the time. There would be no more war, no more hatred, no more cruelty, no more greed. And I suppose the biggest problem we would have is that we would all fall down and worship one another. I pray that you and I have that problem to deal with. God bless you. Namaste.
Thank you for joining us today. If you like the message, we invite you to like it or share it. And we also want to let you know that we're on Instagram, Twitter, and we'll see you again next Sunday on Facebook at 11:25.
We're a New Thought church where lives are transformed, and we welcome you to check us out. Check out our website, unityhills.org. We'll see you next week.
Namaste.